Good morning, guys. So today we're going to be doing step one of making elderberry syrup. So I've got a whole bunch of bags of frozen elderberries that I picked earlier in the year. And what we're going to do is just keep picking them up and gently dropping them, because sometimes they get little holes in them, which is why we've got this bigger bag here. So I'm going to be putting them all in this nice big clean shopping bag, and then we're going to give it a nice shake. And the reason that we're shaking them and that they're frozen is because it is the easiest way to get the berries off of the stems, and it's also the fastest way. To stand here and actually pick off all the elderberries would take you a very, 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 very long time, because they are quite small and fragile, and there are a lot of stems in here. And so I saw somebody else doing this online, and I thought it was such a great idea that I borrowed it. So this is the way I process my elderberries now. And now they're all in this nice big bag. We're going to turn the top down. I'm going to be careful that you don't lose any. These are one of the most medicinally potent fruits that I pick, and I want to keep them all. It's a lot of work to pick them, it's a lot of work to process them, and we don't want to waste any. Alright, so I'm going to take a nice big clean bowl and begin to start separating. So those still have a few attached, these as well. You want to keep as few stems as possible, because the stems are actually toxic. There are going to be a few little pieces that will be a little too hard to get rid of, and so a few of the tinier thin stems is okay. We don't have time to stand here all day and pick stems out of the elderberries, but we do want to be as thorough as we possibly can, so that we don't accidentally get sick and make our medicine inedible. You also want to make sure that you don't put any leaves in here, because the elder leaves are toxic if you ingest them as well. And if I remember correctly, they were used as an emetic, which is something that makes you throw up. And this is medicinal syrup that we definitely don't want to throw up, because it's for cold and flu season. I'm going to be fortifying it with some other herbs, some chamomile, some yarrow, some alehoof, and mugwort. I'm also going to be putting in some old man's beard and wild sunflower, and even some reishi, which is the only mushroom that I put in my elderberry syrup. So you can see most of the stems I'm pulling out of the bag have been denuded of their berries. And we're just going to keep doing this until all of the stems have been separated and we have a nice big bowl full of berries. So these are still in a nice big clump. Here's a leaf, we're going to pull the leaf out. And we're going to shake these stems again, because there are still quite a few berries trapped on here. But what I'm trying to do is get to the bottom of the bag, where most of the berries have loosened up and will be concentrated. So a lot of the little tiny stems will actually stick to your hands, which is something else that I've discovered when doing this. So I try and keep a bowl of water over to the side that I can actually just stick my hand in, wash the stems off, and then dip it in and pull some more little ones out. So this is a lot of work. I won't lie, this is a lot of work, and it may be one of the most labor-intensive foraging processes that I do each year. But it is absolutely worth it. I have been making my own elderberry syrup since I started foraging now, several years it's been, and I have really not gotten sick at all since I started taking this faithfully every day. At the beginning I wasn't taking it every day, only once a week or so, but now I take this every day when I take my mushroom tincture, and it keeps me healthy, keeps the colds and flus and COVIDs and all those other nasty respiratory infections away. And it also is a huge boost to the immune system. So if you've got any immune issues, this is a really great plant to know and use and take. Some of these are nice and big. We've got a couple of different varieties of elder that are growing in the wild here. Some of these with some larger berries, some with smaller berries. I have a couple of different spots that I pick elderberries from in this section of Connecticut. There are a few in my hometown in Hamden. There's a spot in New Haven. There's another spot in Branford. Actually, there are a couple of spots in Branford that I like. But, you know, these are pretty easy to find. And I used to find them all the time along the train tracks. For any of you in southern Connecticut who used to take Metro North down to the city for work like I used to, there are a lot of elderberries growing along the railroad tracks. And the easiest time to find them is in the early summer, late spring, when the elder flowers are in bloom, because the berries themselves, while they may be purple, from far away they look kind of black. And often, if you're lucky, and the umbels, which are the structures, the name of the structures that the flowers and berries grow on, because they're shaped a bit like an umbrella, they get kind of droopy and they hang down from the plant, like below the level of the leaves, so they're much harder to see. But if you find them when they're blooming, the flowers are not nearly as heavy, and they stand up nice and tall and proud from the stems, and they look like white lace umbrellas against a whole bunch of green, so they're pretty easy to see. And that is when I look for my new patches, is when the elderflowers are in bloom. So we're just going to keep going, doing this until we're done. All right. I would suggest you put on a good audiobook or perhaps your favorite TV show, because this, at least if you've got the quantity of berries that I do, this bag is about half full, you're going to be here most of the day. And it's a nice time to meditate on the elderberry. It's a nice time to say thank you and say a couple of prayers for continued harvest, continued health, and to deepen your relationship with this plant, especially if you're picking from the same stands over and over again. I have found that as I pick them and say thank you, year after year, my elderberry stands reward me with more and more berries, which makes sense as the plants continue to grow. But, you know, I like to think that they're appreciative of me appreciating them and sharing their medicine with the world. And so they're giving me a little extra so that it can be given to others, not just myself. And that actually is what I did last year around Christmas time. So I gave a whole bunch of elderberry syrup away last year because I had so many extra berries. and I had so much extra syrup. I still have quite a bit from last year. You can see this is all that's left of last year's syrup, and we still got quite a lot left in here. I had about 3 of these when I was done making it last year. And so I took one and divided it up into small bottles, and I gave some to my friends and family or neighbors or, you know, whoever really wanted some and who I knew would actually take it. My mom has been taking it for about as long as I've been making it. She used to get these really terrible colds where she would completely lose her voice. And, you know, for a teacher, that's really struggling, especially a primary school teacher. She teaches 2nd grade. And it's very hard to teach small children when you don't have a voice. So I told her, I was like, Mom, give these a try, see what you think. And the first year that she took it, she didn't actually lose her voice at all. It went away a little bit, it got a little raspy and a little hoarse, but it didn't disappear completely the way it used to. You know, she used to like be moving her lips and no sound would come out. It was really kind of funny. Not funny, but like, you know. And so now, as soon as she starts to feel sick, she takes some elderberry syrup, and the cold is only half as bad, or not even as bad. You know, like her immune system kicks into overdrive and is able to fight it off so she doesn't lose her voice. I find that when I get the flu, or if I get the flu, because I have had a couple of not like real illnesses, like sometimes I would be sick for a couple of weeks, where I just like couldn't get out of bed, like it was terrible. Oh, we lost a couple of berries there. Oh dear. Anyway, point is, the elderberries will shorten the duration of colds and flus or prevent you from getting them at all. So we're just going to keep pulling the berries off their strings. Kind of rake your hands through. These have thawed out a little bit, so I can start like declumping them. Because they do have a tendency to freeze in just one big massive clump. As you can see with that big pile of stems and berries in the front there. And actually, if you do this as well, a lot of the stems will come up to the top of the bag because the stems are lighter than the berries. So you can see here at the top, I've collected most of the stems from the berries and now just have to keep kind of shaking them a little bit to keep getting the last couple berries off, because as I said, we don't want to waste anything. So what do we do when we are done with these? Separating the berries from the stems. They're still on here, but I'm going to shake them after, just to kind of get some of these bigger pieces of stems out of here so we can see more or less where we are. We're going to soak them in grain alcohol for at least 2 weeks, ideally a little bit longer than that, with the herbs that I mentioned earlier. And then after that, we will be straining out the berries and the herbs, and we are going to soak them in water to extract the water-soluble compounds. And then after that, warm water, not boiling water, but warm water. I usually use my crock pot just because it's easier to control the temperature. And you can leave it on overnight a lot more easily than you can with the stove. Which I don't know is necessarily true because I have an electric stove, so you'd think that it would be kind of the same thing because the crock pot is also electric, but for some reason it makes me feel a little bit safer using the crock pot all night rather than the stove. And then we are going to soak them in honey. And that is how you get your sweetness from the syrup. I like to use local honey because it will have the pollen and nectar from local flowers. And as someone with spring and fall allergies, that is a really good way to combat them. And so I don't really get spring and fall allergies anymore because I take this syrup with the local honey in it. So now really what we're going to do is we're going to continue to pull out the stems from the bag. You can see that there are significantly fewer stems in here than there were before, but there are still some rather thick ones in here. I'm talking about stuff like this or like this, and these are both too thick to really include in the syrup. So I'm going to continue to pick them out, and then we'll be back once I'm ready to soak them in the alcohol. All right, so we've gotten most of the stems out. I'm going to pick out just a little bit more, but you can see now that the only thing really remaining are some of these very tiny little thin boys, and these are all right. You're never going to be able to get all of them out just because they're so small, they're so breakable, and they are very numerous. Something I mentioned earlier, though, is that if you wet your hand and then kind of stick it in here, you'll get them all to stick, and then just wash your hand off. And this will also help bring up some of the bigger pieces to the top by kind of filtering your hand this way. Dip it in the water. Again, we don't want any leaves or any really big stems, but the little tiny ones are all right. Ideally, fewer is better than more, but, you know, we're human and we only have so much time in a day. So now that we're almost there, I'm going to put this back. We're going to be putting in a couple of different herbs in with our elderberry syrup, in with our elderberries for the tincturing part, which is the extraction in alcohol. I have some pure grain alcohol over here, and there are some bottles that are just to the right of me. I know you can't see them right now, but there are some old bottles. I have a couple of wine jugs and some larger glass liquor bottles that I'm going to be reusing as well. They're nice and large, and the mouths are wide enough that the berries will be easy enough to get in and out. Sometimes when you tincture, if you use a bottle that's got a mouth that's too small, it can be really hard to get the rest of the plant particulate out once it's time to unbottle the tincture and then remove the mark, which is what we call the used up plant material. So now that we're more or less satisfied with the number of stems that we've pulled out of our elderberries, we are going to get our bottles. So this is the first one I'm going to use. This is a Carlo Rossi wine jug that I have used to make vinegar and elderberry syrup and plum wine and a whole bunch of other things. There is no need to buy bottles. They sell them full with wine. Just invite a couple of friends over a few weeks, and then you get yourself a nice clean bottle ready to use. We are going to be putting these in don't have my nice big funnel anymore, but what I do have is this ripped plastic bag, and I will be trying to make a funnel out of this so that it's easier to get the elderberries into the bottle. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the corner and stick it in the bottle, and we're going to see if this works. I don't know if it's going to. No, I don't think it will. Let's try this way. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work, but that's okay. I'm going to do it. This is always the tricky part, is getting the berries in the bottle. Ideally, we would have a nice, like, wide mouth, and then I could just pour them all in. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So I will be right back after I decide how I'm going to do this. All right, so I just remembered that you can use a piece of paper as a funnel, and that way you can make the top as wide as you need. And so we're just going to slowly dump the berries in this way. And actually, I think if I use this measuring cup, this will go by a lot more easily. Yep. Look at that. Now we're going to fill the jug about halfway with berries, and then we will put in the alcohol. And the rest, well, we're actually going to put the herbs in and then the alcohol. And I think we may need another piece of paper because this one's getting a little damp. Yep. It was nice while it lasted. I'm gonna go get another piece of paper and fill up this jug. All right, so I think we may have found our solution, which is to cut the bottom off a piping bag, which I would strongly recommend that you buy for this. I'm not usually one to recommend buying things for foraging, but piping bags are really cheap. You can get them at any craft store or online. And it is making a very nice funnel to get these berries in the bottle. Just needs a little encouragement. And because it's plastic, it's not going to disintegrate on you like the paper cone I had used earlier. Why didn't I start with this? Well, because I just remembered I had them. Piping bags are not something I use all the time because I'm not really a cake decorator. But I do have them for some baking projects, and I'm really glad I have them today because this is making this very easy to get the elderberries in the bottle. So we're about halfway full on this jug with elderberries, so we're going to put that to the side. Just pick up a couple of the ones that may have scattered onto the floor or other parts of the counter because, as I said, we spent a lot of time picking these and we don't want to lose any. Each one is full of medicine and we want to keep as much of it as we possibly can. No need to waste. And I also don't think the elderberry shrubs that we picked them from would be overly thrilled that we were wasting their fruit, seeds, and life force. So we're going to be respectful and pick everything up. Even though these berries are very small and squishy, and oh, they're on the floor too. Definitely something you want to wait to do when it's like floor cleaning day, because your floor is going to be a mess. Once you're done with this, I'm going to vacuum and wash the floor, or we're going to have purple spots all over for weeks. These also can be used to make dye. It's not something I use them for because I would much rather have medicine, but they can be used to make dye. They make a nice purple dye as well, I've been told. Here. All right. Now I'm going to get a tray for the next bottle, and we'll see if this helps catch some of the berries that fall. Here's our next bottle. Still got the fun stopper in it. Let's just take that out real quick because that's not going to help. Funnel back in there. There we go. All right, so I'm going to keep filling these bottles, and then we'll be back when we're ready to put in the alcohol and the herbs. All right, so we've got our elderberries all in their bottles, and so we've got about 4 this year, which is twice as much as I had last year, so that's really exciting. We'll be able to give more away to some friends, because at least one of these will be just for me. As I mentioned earlier, this is something I take every day. So we're going to put in our herbs now. So I have some chamomile from last year, and this is the first thing that we're going to finish up. And I'm going to get another piping bag to help get the herbs in here. And the reason I'm using a fresh one is because the other one is all wet and full of elderberry juice. And that's going to make all the herbs stick. And that's really not going to help us get them in the bottle. So here's our nice, fresh, dry piping bag. Now we're going to mix all of this together at the end. So if every herb doesn't make it into every bottle, that is perfectly okay. This is chamomile. That's going to go first. And I had a really good chamomile harvest this year, so I'm going to make sure I use a little extra. Because the year before, we had a really poor chamomile harvest, and so there wasn't really enough to go around, which is when I started putting it in the elderberry syrup. Chamomile is a very important part of a tea blend that I use in the wintertime to ward off colds and flus. And so I figured, since that's what elderberry syrup is for anyway, we may as well stretch out the chamomile, the little bit that we did have, and include it in the elderberry syrup. So that is what we're going to keep doing. So this is about 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup of dried chamomile flowers, which is the most medicinal part of the chamomile plant. And this is Roman chamomile. My mom grows this for me. It is found sometimes in the wild. I've never found it in the wild here. I don't really look for it though, as my mom has a garden plot and she grows this regularly for me, because she knows I like the tea, and also I use it as medicine, which she then gets some of. So we kind of trade. She grows it, I make it into medicine. Alright, so that was probably one of the more challenging ones, just because chamomile flowers are really delicate and they break and they kind of shred. I don't know if you guys could see, but as they're going into the bottle, they kind of crumble apart. Something that we're going to be putting in next are some willow catkins and seeds. So these are from the coastal plain willow, which is one that I find relatively easily around this part of Connecticut, and it's in one of my favorite forests. These are some willows that I've been working with for quite some time. So we're just going to gently pop these in here. The seeds get very fluffy from this one, and these are really strong. They have a lot of the active ingredient, which I believe is called salicylic acid, which is the main component in aspirin derived from willow. And so we're going to be putting that in here as well, because that's really good for you when you are sick also. So we're not using our pastry bag this time because these are so fluffy, I think they're just going to get stuck. So I'm going to use my hands and just kind of slurp them into the bottle. You can see some of the fluff is coming out, and that's okay. There was no way we were going to get it all in here without a few little flyaways, and we managed to keep most of them in the bottle, which is good. Okay, so the next one we are going to use is ale hoof. Okay, so this is a particularly powerful herb for a whole bunch of different reasons. It's really good for you when you're sick. It's also full of vitamins and minerals. It's really good for the digestion. It's good for the lungs. It was given to painters long ago because it helps with lead poisoning and liver detoxification. It's also really tasty and can be used as an herb or a substitute for spinach when it's fresh. You can also use it dried as a seasoning, which I do, but today we're going to be putting it in with our elderberries as medicine. And this one I'm going to use my little bag funnel for, because it seems to be a little uncooperative when it comes to going into this bottle. So I'm going to see if this helps. Yeah, there we go. So you notice I'm putting the herbs in different bottles as we go along, and that's just to kind of distribute them a little bit more easily. And also we are going to be mixing this all together once it's been tinctured up. All right. Our next herb that we're going to be using is a little bit of lichen, actually. This is called Old Man's Beard, and this batch, I'm not going to be using all the stuff in the bag because this has been very hard to find lately. Mostly find it out in eastern Connecticut along the Rhode Island border in the pine forests over there, and on like Cape Cod. This enjoys very moist air, ideally around the coast, and also usually I find growing on white pine or pitch pine, which are not particularly common along the coast in this part of Connecticut. So I'm going to save just a little bit of this for myself, just in case we need it before we find any more. This next plant that I'm going to be putting in here is called dodder, or scald weed. Now this in particular is really good for back pain, which is something I've been suffering from tremendously this year, which makes it kind of makes sense if you think about the way this plant grows. So if you're a farmer, you may be familiar with dodder because it is a pest species. It's parasitic and will wrap itself around the stems of many crops, especially cereals, and it kind of strangles the life out of them. But it grows in sort of a wrapping, twisting way, and it looks kind of like it would be good for your back, because if you think about like wrapping and twisting, like holding your spine together, adding some support, and then helping you that way, I don't know, makes sense in my mind. I'm not sure if that's real, but it sounds like it could be. So I'm going to put the rest of my dodder in there, and then we're going to put in some yellow-toed flax, which is a native species of snapdragon, which is also really good for cold and flus. And this is in one nice big whole piece. Let's see if we can get it all. Oh, almost all in there, just like that. You know, maybe we'll snap. There we go. So all of these you can see were picked at different times of the year. Not right now, but that's okay. They're dry just as good as they are fresh, and this way we will have plenty for the winter time. So next we're going to put in some yarrow, and yarrow is a particular favorite of mine because he is so useful, so easy to find, and used for just about anything you can think of, from pain to upset stomach to reducing fever to shortening the length of a cold. Was even used in divination. It's also used to stop bleeding. It's antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal. I use it all the time when I'm out in the field and I cut myself because it will stop the bleeding almost immediately. All you need is a little bit, and you just pop it on an open wound and then moisten it, and the compounds in the plant will coagulate your blood and keep you from bleeding. Something else yarrow is really good for is sleep. So the roots in particular can be placed under your pillow, and it's said to promote calm and restful sleep and keep nightmares away. I'm going to put in just a little more yarrow because you can never have too much yarrow. And it smells just wonderful. Kind of like your grandfather's attic or something, you know, it's a little musty but nostalgic in a way. All right. Now we're going to put in some mugwort, which is another one of my favorite herbs. This will help promote sleep and also help with respiratory infections. It's also really good at relieving anxiety. And so I am going to take more stems from this because the stems are just as powerful as the leaves, and they will fit in the bottle nice and easily. Whether they will come out nice and easily is another story, but I guess we'll figure that out when we get there. Might need a chopstick just to shove all that down. Mugwort is also really helpful for sleep, and when you're sick, it's really important to get a good night's sleep. Lastly, for our plants, we're going to be throwing in some mullein, which is a really good decongestant for the lungs. So I have some leaves and root here that I'm going to be putting in. And we're just going to throw that in the bottle. And last, but certainly not least, our one medicinal mushroom that we're putting in here. You can put other ones in, but reishi is specifically for the immune system. And reishi and elderberry work really, really well together. So I'm going to be putting a little bit of reishi in each of the bottles because it is our last one. Reishi is available usually in May or June in this part of the country, and so these have been dried for quite some time. And then if you dry your mushrooms, your reishi, it will last for quite a long time. These are actually 2 years old now, and they are still just as wonderful as when I picked them. They actually smell even better now, sort of like spring grass and sunshine. All right, so now that we've got all our herbs in our bottles, I'm going to take a chopstick and just kind of shove down anything that's above the neckline of the bottle so that everyone remains below the level of the alcohol. And then we will be steeping this for at least 2 weeks, but probably a little bit longer. Right now it's about the middle of November, and I have enough elderberry syrup that will last me until at least the middle of December, and then I will probably do the next step then, because the next step only takes about 24 hours to do a hot water extraction, whereas the alcohol takes significantly longer. And so right now I'm just pouring in our grain alcohol. Oh, hope we have enough. If not, we may have to go back to the store and get some more. You want just enough that it covers the plant material and mushrooms in here completely. There we go. So we may fill this up a little bit more. I just want to get the rest of them covered over a little bit before I go out to the store and get some more Everclear, because I don't think I'm going to have enough. I thought two handles would be enough, but it doesn't look like it's going to be. Bit more Everclear, but I don't have quite enough to do this last bottle, so I'm just going to use the remainder of this little bottle for the big jug. And I will go out and buy some more, finish this one up, and I'll see you guys in a month when we do the next step. Happy foraging and good health.